Tales from the Dark Side is a 1990 film which was recently released by Shout Factory slash Scream Factory in 2020, so probably like 6 months ago or something like that, in the collector's edition famous line that Scream Factory releases a ton of classics on. Got your original cover art from there. Tales from the Dark Side, for anybody who doesn't know, was a television series that ran in the 80s, kind of similar to Tales from the Crypt and Creepshow. You're kind of getting along those lines when it comes to films like this. It obviously is an anthology, and that's why I kind of jumped on it right away. I had never seen it before, so this is my first time tonight seeing this film. And I mean, right from the cover, it just gives you full-on Creepshow vibes, which Creepshow 1 and 2 are some of my favorite anthologies. I have not watched the third, although I've only heard shitty things about the third, Creepshow 3, so I'll eventually get to it, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. And Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, really caught my interest because it seems right up that kind of alley. Same with Tales from the Crypt, I think I've mentioned that already. Always a show that I like to watch, Tales from the Crypt. Freaky stories, like anthologies have always been my thing ever since I was a kid, and I'm pretty much sold right away when it comes to any kind of anthology, whether it's horror or not. But horror anthologies fits like a glove, so they're really good. You get some new interviews here with the director John Harrison, and one from the producer, and then you get a bunch of other special features that already came with the original release on this. But getting right into it, I would say I was pretty underwhelmed with what what my hopes were going into it. It didn't suck or anything, but I was really expecting something to blow me away, just like Creepshow 1 and 2 did, and I can't really say that it did that really, but it was alright. You get 3 stories and then a wraparound story, so it says 4, and I was confused. It says 4 ghoulish fables in one modern nightmare, so I was expecting 4 separate stories, either with a wraparound or not, but you get 3 of them with the wraparound, which makes 4. And they're goofy, they're quirky, and they are pretty creepy. I mean, they do have their effects. You know, they in the horror genre and horror realm. This film fits in its time. It does feel very 80s. It's 1990, but it feels like 1985 in a lot of what's going on and how it's directed and produced. But yeah, like I said, I pretty much said everything that's really spoiler free. Like I said in previous videos, I'm one that considers any review whatsoever a spoiler. So if you haven't seen the film, just go watch it, or if you're interested in watching it, watch it first and then watch the review, because obviously I'm going to be explaining a little bit. Even if it's minor details, I'm still going to have to explain kind of where the film goes. So I consider anything a spoiler. Any review whatsoever, to me, is a spoiler. So I avoid reviews entirely until I've seen a film, if I really want to watch that film. So from here on forward, I'm going to be explaining the film briefly. I'm not going to go full spoiler mode, but obviously I'm going to be talking about it. So for anybody who hasn't seen it, I suggest go watch it first. But if you don't care, stick around. So it starts off with this mother driving home through a total 80s suburban neighborhood, and she's waving at the neighbors and all that. The music just fits right in the tone for an 80s film. And she gets home, and as soon as she enters her door, there's basically a pantry door, which it kind of looks like a door to her basement or something, but the knob is the door's locked, but the knob keeps twisting, and she's about to come into the house. She's unlocking the door, and you just see this knob going like this, and she enters the home, and then it stops, and you're wondering oh, somebody's in the house, or some monster's in the house, or something like that. Turns out it's this kid. This kid is behind the pantry who she's keeping in there, and I do recognize the kid. I got his name, but he just looked very familiar. I wish I did like look up if he was in other things, because he seems like somebody that I've seen a lot, like nostalgia wise, in older films from the 80s and 90s. But regardless, this woman is keeping him there to cook him up and eat him. And she's got this whole like mise en place of vegetables all prepared and shit. It's kind of funny, but she tosses him this book, and a book that basically she's been obsessed with all her life, called Tales from the Dark Side, and this kid is reading these three stories from that book, which is the three stories that play out in this anthology, while waiting for himself to be cooked. It's a really weird wraparound. Sometimes they don't really focus too much on the wraparounds because they're so focused on the anthology stories, but this one's bizarre. So this kid is locked up behind this cage and he's reading these three stories. The first one is called Lot 249, which basically involves this really nerdy guy played by Steve Buscemi. By the way, should I start with the cast first or get into the stories first? The cast in this movie, man, you got Christian Slater, Steve Buscemi, Julianne Moore, you got James Remar in here, you've got a bunch of other familiar faces that pop up here and there that you've seen before, but not all of them you recognize by name. But this film has quite a lot of people that are famous today, especially for to see them in something like this and then think of how much they've grown and evolved into other things, horror and non-horror. It's interesting. But yeah, Steve Buscemi, he basically buys this box called Lot 249. It's this massive box, and his two friends, Andy, it's Andy, right? Yes, Andy and Lee, discover this box in his dorm room. This takes place all in a dorm, and it turns out inside this box is a tomb, and in the tomb is a mummy, a 3,000-year-old mummy, and Steve Buscemi is obviously the most awkward, nerdy, creepy guy that you can have in an 80s movie. He's that guy, and he starts to like dissect the mummy, and he knows all these facts about, you know, hieroglyphics and ancient mummy rituals and the whole pulling the brain through the nose and all that. He's your expert on all that, and the story basically turns into a mummy slasher. The mummy comes alive once Steve Buscemi reads the hieroglyphic script, and you get a mummy slasher. The kills are good. You do obviously get a kill involving the mummy dragging somebody's brains outside of their nose and leaving it right on the fruit bowl on the counter with apples and bananas and brain. It's great. Story number 2 might be my favorite, but I'd have to really think about them to see which one would be my favorite, because they're all entertaining in their own way. But 2 is really, really funny. Basically, you get a hitman who's hired by this really old guy in a wheelchair. And he's a really rich guy, obviously, because he's living in a mansion. And he hires this hitman to assassinate a cat, a black cat. He's going to be paid $100,000 or $100 million or something like that. I forget what thousand. I think it's million, because this guy's just loaded. To kill a black cat. And apparently this black cat is so evil and had killed 3 people in that mansion already. 3 friends of this old guy's. And he's telling the story of how the cat did it. The cat tripped one lady, and the cat suffocated another lady in her bed. And then the third guy was like a hired hand, kind of like a butler. And this cat apparently was in the trunk, but somehow teleported to the dashboard of the car and then made the guy crash or something. So this cat is like an evil son of a bitch, and it's basically this mafioso hitman versus a black cat. So it's really, really funny and really clever how they do things. The way the cat kills the guy, I'm not going to go into detail on that one, but man, is it hilarious. And is it gory. Like, it's funny, and it's packed with blood. It's just... It just makes you smile if you like horror movies. The way they played it off, it's fantastic. And then you get your third story, outside of the wraparound, obviously, where you follow this struggling artist, and his agent basically like retires him or doesn't want to work for him anymore because his art is not, profitable. And he's basically broke again. He's down on his luck, and he goes to this bar, gets wasted, and on the way out of the bar at closing time, him and the bartender, or the bartender's letting him out, and then in the back alley, this monster shows up with wings. It looks like a gargoyle pretty much, with like massive ass wings, and murders the bartender, slices his head off, and then gives your protagonist this artist guy named Preston, played by James Remar, and gives him a chance at life again, only if and only if he never mentions what he saw that night ever. So with the promise of that, he will let Preston live, and Preston obviously agrees, and the monster slashes his chest with 3 claws and says never mention seeing what you just saw tonight ever again to anybody. Well, lo and behold, I'll just leave it at that, but what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, it plays out from there, and then his life obviously goes to higher ups, and he starts getting lucky with stuff, and his art and other things following it, and then it comes to an inevitable and predictable climax where shit hits the fan once again. And then you got the ending, which is the wraparound story. And again, I'm going to leave that one non-talked about, but it was, I would say, the most underwhelming part of this kind of underwhelming film. It was okay. Like, it was just, I didn't know what to think about it. It didn't really mean much. It just kind of made its way out, just forced itself to end. That's really all I gotta say about that. I just wish these stories were fleshed out more. If you're gonna compare this to Creepshow, if you're gonna compare this to Tales from the Crypt, they both win when it comes to just their production and screenplays. They age better. They not that well. Maybe I shouldn't say they age better, because this film, I would say, is pretty entertaining for its time. But it's good. It's not great. You know what I mean? It's just, maybe my expectations were too high too, though. Maybe I went into it like expecting, a phenomenal anthology, because for something that Scream Factory put out, and for something that's so nostalgic and classic, because horror anthologies, like I mentioned at the beginning, are pretty nostalgic to me. So maybe my own hopes were a little bit pushed to the hilt, but still, it's it's nothing that I regret watching, or I'm disappointed in watching, or anything like that. I thought the monsters were cool. That's the Gorgile and the wow, I can't even speak. Gargoyle. Gargoyle in the third story, and then you got your mummy and your cat. So yeah, and the book that the little dude is reading in that cage before he's eaten. He doesn't get eaten, for anybody who's worried about watching a little kid get boiled alive. No, it doesn't happen. But yeah, that's Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, and I am glad I checked it out. That's all I got. That's all I got for today. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like listening to my voice, or if you like my film reviews, and I will be back for more. I love doing horror reviews, as I love horror films, but this channel is packed with all kinds of reviews in all kinds of different genres and all kinds of different time periods. So, yeah, that's about it. So, until next review, I will talk to you soon. Cheers.